Our speaker is Tanya Boyd. She may look as though she's in Austin, Texas, but she is in Louisiana. She is a project manager. She may have the longest speech title of any presentation we've ever had. It is called Using Tuckman's Model to Effectively Navigate Team Development, Understanding Your Team Dynamics to Accelerate Progress. And this is kind of a project management topic, but she's going to explain how all of the information she's going to share with you is applicable to the job search. And I think very often project management tools and approaches are applicable to your family, to your volunteer work, to any time when there are people working together to try to get something done. So I think we're all going to be taking notes on this one. Tanya worked 20 plus years on cross-functional teams in the industries of healthcare, IT, government services, disaster recovery, and mortgage origination. She has amassed a wide array of interesting experiences that have helped to teach her about the power of teamwork. She is passionate about motivating others to bring ideas to the table for discussion and engaging in activities that help to inspire laughter, wellness, and productivity. She has been an active board member of the Baton Rouge PMI chapter since 2016, has served in the roles of VP of Professional Development and VP of Finance. She is the current presidente of the chapter and is passionate about connecting her community to opportunities. She works at Antares Technology Solutions and collaborates with her team and clients to understand their business challenges and identifies ways to improve business processes through software solutions. So she's all about business and technology and team management. So let's give a warm welcome with a small group of people to Tanya Boyd.
Hi, I wanted to say before I start sharing the slide, just thank y'all for having me here today. And just kind of a brief topic on the power of networking. So the whole reason that I'm here today is Ahmed Zuhair had actually spoken for my Baton Rouge chapter. I think it was in either April or May of this year. And so he connected me with Shannon, and Shannon got in touch with me for this opportunity. So while what I present today is a topic in project management about team motivation, and it deals with Tuckman's model, as I go through this, I want each and every one of you to think about the different teams that you have in your life, whether they've been work teams, whether they're your children's school teams, any outside teams that you have, and just think about how those dynamics work and how y'all could apply them in using, each other's resources for job searching together or searching with the team. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And I did want to point out too that as we go through this, I'll be available if you have any questions on them. Just know when I'm starting this, I'm not going to be able to see the chat as well. So Kathy, if you can help me with that, if something comes up into the chat, or if anybody wants me to stop and focus a little bit heavier on things, just take yourself off of mute and let me know. So, all right.
Thank you. I'll be glad to do that, Tanya.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons that I chose this topic, I had presented on this topic for the first time about a year ago for my own project management board. And it just really inspired that. Was thinking about my life, thinking about my work teams, thinking about, my project management board team and how everybody has different needs, different motivations, different personalities, and really trying to figure out, okay, how do we think about empathy in other people's shoes to put ourselves in their circumstances and understand what they're going through. So the agenda is just basically, what is teamwork? Why is it important? Who is Bruce Wayne Tuckman? What are the stages of the model? How to identify the telltale signs of it, and tips to get to the next level. And then we'll talk of just different circumstances that can kind of trigger each of the stages. Okay, so teamwork. Really, the concept has been around forever. When I had to put some thought into it and going, okay, what were my first teams? I always think back to like elementary school or science fair projects, or those different things, even at recess, where you had to kind of collaborate together, play games together, kind of give and take sort of circumstance. Like I said, I think that applies to most of us as well. And I know for each and every one of you, it sounds like y'all are in a situation where y'all are actively searching for a job, so just understanding the resources that are available to you and how other people can help you through that. And even before I started this presentation, I was on mute for a while, but I was listening to some of the different things that Kathy had to share. And I think y'all have got a great group here, and I would encourage each of you that even when you are lucky enough to find that dream job, just even staying connected with the different networks that you establish, because you never know who else you can turn around and pay the favor towards and help out. I think it's just good advice. Okay, so the benefits of teamwork. It just helps us to build a sense of community. It helps you both personally and professionally. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned kind of through my job of project management is how much that actually translates to my personal life. Whether I'm taking on initiatives around the house or trying to manage myself, time management on whether the yard work that gets done first, the bills get paid done first, or the housework gets done, some of those lessons in project management all come into play. Even teamwork, it enables quicker execution of ideas and just your problem solving experiences. On the topic of creativity, it's been my experience that the more that I talk to other people and pull in different perspectives, the more I kind of hit on different ideas that could help me in the future. Okay, and I really liked this quote, that coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is a success. Because we all know with the different personalities, different agendas, sometimes that's a lot easier said than actually done. Okay, so just quick backstory before I get into the stages of Tuckman model on who Bruce Wayne Tuckman was. He was actually a psychological researcher from New York. This theory's been around since 1965, and the model recognizes that groups don't start fully formed. When people first come together, they have to kind of feel each other out and start understanding one another. And then it's a process that we go through in learning the different ways of working or how to navigate resources. And then just because I'm one of these people that I like fun facts, and I thought this was funny, was that in 1991, he developed a 32-item procrastination scale. To me, as a project manager, sometimes we get stuck in the planning stages more than we do the actual doing the work and executing it. So that was just my little trivia right there. Okay, so the stages. The first one is actually norming. The second one is something that's called storming. The third one's forming. And then let me see, actually. I think I did that one backwards. I'm sorry about that. So norming, storming, or forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. My apologies on that. Okay, so the forming stage. And as I'm talking about that, I kind of want each of you to think about the instances that drew you into this group. And I might ask a couple of different questions, from the group if y'all are willing to share. So forming is the introduction of the new team members. There's an orientation or an induction into the existing team. And then you learn a lot about what the project objectives are. So for instance, with searching with the team, your objectives would be to form different bonds within this group to help one another on your job search journeys. I'd like to pause for just a second, and ask just a couple of members in the group if you'd like to share how long that you've been part of the Launchpad group.
16 years.
16 years. Okay. So during that time, have you found other jobs? Is this something that you've stayed connected with throughout the duration and then stayed involved to help other people through it?
Yes, reconnected many times. I found out and joined after my first layoff in 2004.
Mhm.
Worked with Kathy to implement some software a couple of times. And then every time that I've had another layoff or quit a job, I rejoined for the support.
Right. Through this process, have you helped others find jobs too? Do you turn around and provide the groups that you formed with in here? Have you provided them with leads as well?
Absolutely. That's my main way of getting out of myself and my own worries and kind of illuminating how to go after a job and keep a good attitude.
I think that is a wonderful point, because the biggest things with teams to me is just the reminder that you don't have to go through circumstances in life alone. There's always people that are going through similar circumstances and willing to help one another. And there's a lot of people that get a lot of joy from the opportunity of really helping other people form teams and helping them to grow. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Let's focusing back on this in the forming stage, which again, it's the beginning of anything with a team, any group that you join. A lot of times when you first join, you're focused a little bit on your individual agenda, like the what's in it for me. You're trying to size other people up. You're trying to understand the dynamic of the group and figure out where you're going to fit in. And typically when you first join a team, you kind of tend to be on your best behavior because you want everybody to think highly of you. So a lot of times when people are first getting to know one another, the conflict doesn't immediately come out the gate. So these are just some different ideas, kind of on each shifting idea. So when you're first forming a team, and this is kind of pulled from my own personal experience, just things that I found really worked well for bonding people. Had experiences that organizations I've worked for, they did employee fun facts, employee spotlights, and shared different stories. One of my previous jobs that I was with a mid-sized healthcare organization, and we had a vendor on board that was helping us to implement, it was a ServiceNow contract. But one of the things that we did in the beginning for the teams to know each other was just everybody kind of went around the room and shared a fun fact about themselves. Sometimes icebreakers can be a little bit awkward to implement, but I do still think, especially in a virtual world, and a lot of us really re-navigating that and re-navigating back to in person after 2 years, we almost need something to replace that water cooler conversation and just learn more about one another. Some other different things that I've seen is just employee engagement. I've had opportunities to work at different places where we bring in our funny coffee mugs and, we talk about how we got the mug, why we like them, share different preferences on music or movies or different things of that nature. I've even participated in an online scavenger hunt, which was kind of fun. In another lifetime, when I lived in Baton Rouge, I'm actually, even though I'm president of the Baton Rouge chapter, I physically live about an hour and a half away in a town called Lafayette, Louisiana. But when I was living in Baton Rouge, I worked on a Medicaid contract and I would help to implement exercise initiatives. So I was always the person that when it was time for a break, I'd grab my coworkers and we'd go talk and walk business. And even at my current job right now, which I'm a bit of a hybrid role where I work from home a lot, but I also travel an hour and a half to Baton Rouge many days. I usually try to get my team, to come walk with me and talk sometimes about some of the problems rather than being in front of the computer all the time. And so just even some fun things, kind of creating fun themed parties. I've always enjoyed that at work. And even if you're in a situation where you're looking for work, just sharing some fun things and encouraging each other on different things that impact your life. Okay, now going to talk about what is called the storming stage. I know I have experienced this in probably every job that I've gone into. I'm not a naturally argumentative person, but there's always people that have different opinions on ways of working, what's going to work best. And I imagine some of you in this group have differences on what approach works best for your resume, for your LinkedIn, for your job search, and I think y'all having this group and being able to talk about what has worked for you, what hasn't worked for you, where you found levels of success could really help one another out. But even when you get back into the workforce, just even recognizing the fact that all teams go through a certain level of healthy conflict. Sometimes there's unhealthy conflict, but this is kind of the storming stage. It's where the team differences are apparent. There's probably times that there's some perceptions that a certain team member is slacking, or the feeling that, hey, I'm the one doing all the work. You may have experienced some instances where sub-teams kind of develop and they talk to each other rather than sharing with the collective as a whole. I'm kind of one of these people, and this translates to my PMI board, and it also translates to my work life, where I believe in transparency. I believe if there's something kind of going afoul, it's better to bring it up and give the people in the room the opportunity to talk about it and discuss it, and then come to sort of collaboration and collective solution on how to move past it. And then just advice on moving past the storming stage. I think empathy is more important now than it's ever been. I mean, I've always been one of these people that thought that it definitely had a huge place in the world. But I think these past couple of years have taught us, that there's a lot of people going through different things. There's many people who experience layoffs that may have never, ever, ever had a layoff in their entire career, and so that probably leaves people with the question of, why did this happen to me? Was I not good enough for this role? I think it's just the world is changing. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's so many of us that have been impacted by the pandemic. So I would encourage y'all, even with, if you're forming teams in this group, if there's areas of confrontation, don't leave it unchecked. Figure out ways that you can compromise and work with one another and find solutions, to help one another. There's not a one size fits all. Let's see if I can move this, and then even just asking for the group's feedback and their point of view. And then just practicing tolerance for different perspectives. Now, I'd like to kind of pull in somebody, to maybe share too. Have any of you experienced, storming in y'all's jobs, or have y'all experienced a positive instance where maybe there's conflict that's going on, but it's been acknowledged and you've come to a healthy solution? Okay, the norming stage. The norming stage is when the dust starts to settle in new teams. That's when you become more familiar with each other's way of working. You learn a little bit more about one another's personalities. So sometimes you're not taking things quite as personally. The team starts to notice and value each other's skill sets. So here, I'd like to kind of pivot it back, to y'all's group, searching with the team. There's probably some of y'all that may have better computer skills, on LinkedIn, and then others that maybe have, editing skills or a way of wording things differently, or finding the correct terminology to get through the job scan and get through the applicant tracking system. So that's one of those things in this group to be on the lookout. It's just kind of seeing who has the different strengths and how you can work collectively to help each other as a whole. And also during the norming stage, more trust develops as the team becomes more confident with one another. The communication probably increases a lot more, and that's totally natural too. Once you become more familiar, it's easier to kind of reach out. I've experienced this a lot, like Kathy had mentioned at the beginning. I've been involved with PMI, got the certification in 2014, and been in a role of leadership since 2016. So I've been very steady and very consistent in that. And as a result, there's a lot of people that are not only members of our group, but guests of the group that are reaching out to me on a constant level, just saying, hey, did you review my resume? Or hey, what should I do with my LinkedIn banner? Or when's y'all's meeting? Who's the next speaker you're getting? And just even life advice. I mean, I've made some lifelong friends, not only with people that are in my local group, but also on LinkedIn. LinkedIn to me is a fantastic place to build relationships. And I've watched a lot of the power of it too, where I've seen people that are strangers that have never met each other in person, but they know each other virtually. And I have seen multiple instances over the past couple of years of people landing jobs from someone that they never met in person. So, then back on the team, and this is kind of more, in the work circumstance, but the team leader may be able to let the team divide tasks kind of amongst themselves without feeling the need to heavily interfere or micromanage the work that's going on. And the team, a lot of times, once they get a little bit more normalized, they may actually be able to go to each other and talk to each other about the problem, or say, hey, I had a bad day. I approached that in the wrong direction. Let me make that up to you. And I'm sorry I acted like that, rather than just having to escalate to a manager. Okay, and so the outperform, this is kind of more when your team really starts to gel and starts to go, kind of starts to accelerate at the peak point. That's where you start offering the peer-to-peer learning opportunities. I'm always going to advocate for cross-functional learning. I mean, there's a lot of companies, and there's a lot of teams where people only do one role, and it's very siloed. And I think as the world has changed a lot, I would really encourage people, if there's another skill that you want to learn, and different resources like udemy.com or some of those, lesser expensive online courses, that's a great way to learn. And if you have knowledge that you think other people could benefit from, definitely, if you have the opportunity and bandwidth to do your part to teach them and share your knowledge, it's a good thing that can help others. And so just even, at this stage, the teams kind of have a little bit more emotional intelligence and have a little bit more intuition, and they brainstorm together. Also, another thing is just recognizing the efforts of others and being generous with encouragement and feedback. I heard something at my job the other day, and it made me wish they got accolades more often. We have daily stand-ups, and one of the other project managers, I think, had gotten a really, really complimentary email from one of the parish clerks that she works with. And I could tell she was almost in tears. She's like, I haven't gotten an email like this in years. It's just so nice to actually be recognized and rewarded. So to me, it's just a reminder, lift other people up, and when you do that, you get a lot of dividends too. If you realize, okay, I can help somebody out in this effort, it goes such a long way. And then the performing stage. This is just, where a team is in a state of conscious flow, operating as a collective conscience. Communication is resolved more quickly. There's a heightened sense of ownership and accountability on the team from making sure that there's a success, and the members take on various roles and are open to new ideas and creative solutions. Again, I'm going through this rather quickly, but I'd like somebody that's been involved with this group to share of an instance that maybe you've had with this group has helped you come up with a new idea or a new solution that you had never heard before that may be helping you.
Well, Tanya, I'll go ahead and go. Hi, Rick here. Well, last week our speaker talked about having a schedule when you're unemployed, and that, I know that seemed like a novel idea to me. And so, yeah, just the self-discipline of I'd have to-do lists, and then I'd battle with my own head. Well, I should be, but having a schedule, just like you have your job is looking for work, I guess. And I just wanted to make one comment. I should have said something before when you asked a question. One thing I've learned in the last couple of years, I couldn't think of an actual work environment conflict, but I've learned that conflict was always something I should avoid at all costs. But I've learned that, again, that's not a good idea. It can escalate. But I like the idea of conflict management, because that brings out things that should be addressed, and it's just so matter of finding a way of having safe dialogue with whoever you're having your conflict with. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I've got a couple of points to that. I'll start first with the conflict management. I understand that, because I'm one of these people that it's like I always like the laughter and the happy-go-lucky. But yeah, over the past couple of years, there's definitely been a lot of conflict that I've had to address, and it's scary. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's scary to have to do it, but it teaches you growth, and the more that you do it, I'm not saying go out there and start arguments, but the more you address, hey, I don't quite understand what you're saying. Could you say this in a different manner? Could you explain your thought process on that? I might not agree with this idea. Let's see, what the board thinks and how we can work together to come to some sort of collaborative consensus. Just even going through that exercise of speaking your mind and being transparent, it teaches you those coping skills, and it teaches you how to even set boundaries too. Like, there's a lot of times I've realized over the years I'm getting more and more opportunities, which is amazing. But sometimes I've had to learn how to say no, because I'm like, well, okay, it's time management. I want to do all of these things, but how do I prioritize it? And so even pivoting back to the schedule, you're absolutely right. I mean, finding a job is not easy. So one thing I would encourage y'all on that, if there's different scheduling tools y'all have, and I mean, everybody works differently, whether it's OneDrive or OpenNote, or maybe it's Excel, or maybe this is a project manager term, but there's something called a Kanban board. It's really not fancy, and that's spelled Kanban, but it's basically like a to-do list. And there's a lot of different tools out there like Trello, and there's a tool that I like even on the PowerPoint. I used PowerPoint, and I used a graphic design tool called canva.com. And I pay for a subscription to Canva. It's about $13 a month, but I use it for a lot of announcements on LinkedIn, and I use it for my creative initiatives, but they've got Kanban boards in there. And you can actually type on it, and it lets you know, okay, what's a work in progress, what's being done right now, and what's finalized. So there's different ways to manage that. And I definitely heard like not only the schedule, but just even documenting the different jobs that you're applying to, putting the name of the company, if you applied on Indeed, if it was word of mouth, and having some sort of a spreadsheet where you can track that, and you can go back and remember what you did and have a good reference point for that. And that way too, if you're working together as a team, if one of y'all is doing that and even like gets in a virtual session like this and says, hey, I've been tracking, this is how I set up my Excel spreadsheet. I used to do that with my fitness all the time. Like 2 years ago, I was really very, very committed to fitness. And I find myself after everything trying to get back to that and track it. Like, so I track my Fitbit steps and like, how many times I've gone to class, stuff like that. But there's this little system that I've got in place that keeps me accountable. And when I feel like I'm falling off, sometimes I'll share that little accountability list with other people and go, why was I having this moment? Help pull me back in check. So I think having other people in the mix is definitely a motivator with anything in life, So thank you for sharing too, Rick. Okay, so just some different tips on sustaining, like once you get into a flow, And I mean, even in job search, and I mean, if you're having like a great week, like I know there's got to be buckets in time where you're not hearing anything from anybody, you've got no word back. That's when I would tell you to lean on your group members. If you're feeling down, find one of your friends that's going through same things and lift one another up. And even when you do find a job, share what you did that helped you out. And this is just it kind of the performance, if you're having a good week, share that too. But on the job role, it's just offering volunteer opportunities outside of the office. And I'll speak to that as a PMI board. That's something we're looking to do in 2023. We haven't been having outside, we've been having our virtual meetings, we've been having in-person meetings, but we haven't actually done volunteer or charity work, which we feel like we need to be doing to give back to the community. But that's even another opportunity to form alliances and form teams and form networks and meet more people to get ideas from and collaborate with. And I believe in the power of the network. The more people that you know and the more people you feel comfortable talking to, the more allies that you have on your side when you're going into a job search. Okay, and the adjourning stage, this is really kind of at the end of the project, so what I do at work, and I mean, it depends upon where I'm working too, because I've had a lot of different experiences. Sometimes I'm working on the same project for a very, very long duration. And then other times it's maybe a 2 or a 3 month project, and then the team disbands and goes off to something else. I would imagine with the dynamics of this group, it's much the same too, that y'all probably had a lot of people that after they found a job, they wind up kind of dropping off communication and only coming back intermittently. And that's probably very normal too. And I guess I wanted to ask this to Kathy or Shannon. When y'all have people that you find out have found a job, do y'all celebrate them? Do y'all acknowledge it within the team?
Yes, we do it in the meetings. Also, there are some people that Shannon features in the newsletter, which is a really big deal. She interviews them and has their picture and talks a little bit about how Launchpad might have helped them in the process. When we had face-to-face meetings, it was a little bit easier to have a real celebration and everybody cheered, and it was a group hooray. Now it's a little bit more difficult, and just the whole Zoom thing being separate but together
Right.
changes the dynamic. But yeah, we try to celebrate whenever we possibly can. Anything that somebody tells us. That's another thing. It used to be easier for us to hear about good news from people than it is now.
Right. Do y'all ever have any members that come back like after they've found a job and then share their success story too?
Oh
try
yeah,
to-
and in
okay,
fact,
good,
sometimes yes, and
good.
sometimes they're speakers. Sometimes they say, "I would like to make a presentation and
Right.
talk about my journey and what worked for me, and share it with others." We also have people that get jobs and then tell us about job openings at the companies where they work, or
Right.
meet with current members and talk to them a little bit about the culture and the hiring process, and in some
Okay.
cases even champion them for a position. It just varies.
Okay.
But all of that stuff seems to be a little bit more challenging when we don't meet physically. That's one of the reasons that we're trying to now your PMI meetings, are they physical live meetings, or are they
They've been both. So whenever, and we had when the pandemic hit, I had recently moved in 2000. I moved in April of 2019 from Baton Rouge to Lafayette to help my elderly father. And so I kind of took a break from the board, except in like a volunteer capacity. And so when 2020 came around, there was another board member that decided to run for president, and I wound up being over finance. So she had just onboarded as president when the pandemic hit. So that was tough. So we had about 3 months that we were trying to figure things out. I mean, everything was canceled. We finally settled on Zoom as a platform. So we started conducting the virtual meetings again, and had to reshuffle some of the in-person speakers that we had and reach back out to them and say, hey, would y'all be okay with doing this virtually? Would that work
Yeah.
for you? Have you pivoted enough to, to adapt to that? And it worked out. We did go back to some in person in 2020. So we had some. We did in 2021 as well, the later part of 2021, when the numbers started spiking, we canceled it through the duration of the year. But all of 2022, we've been doing both, so we meet, it's the second Tuesday of every month. We have our virtual, and then the third Thursday, we've got our in-person. And this year it's been a little bit quirky because we're doing both in person in Lafayette and Baton Rouge, and we've got a small board. I mean, we've got 4 elected officials, and we've all got
Yeah.
full-time jobs. So it's trying to figure out the capacity planning and how we structure that, but how we grow and, still keep
Yeah.
people engaged. Because
Yeah, exactly.
one thing with the virtual I've learned in our group, like we've grown virtually, like it's been like the message gets shared a lot, and we get more attendance with that than we do in person. Now, we just had a 25-year anniversary, and we had about 47 at that. And then we're having a holiday party, which our max, just because room seating is going to be about 60. So it's almost like, and that's a project. I mean, that's almost like a project and a team. Every time we get a speaker and we
Yeah.
restart the cycle, and the process begins itself all over, But yeah, so we've been doing a bit of both, and it's in person is definitely impacted since COVID. And whether or not there's concerns, with the pandemic, or whether it's just people have gotten used to another mode of not dressing up and even re-engaging in person. Like, I'm a complete extrovert, but re-navigating those channels, it's challenging, and even with my current team in Baton Rouge, like I tend to, a lot of times, I don't travel every week, thankfully, because that would be a lot to sustain, but a lot of times when I travel, it's in the middle of the week, like on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and I have to realize too, they've all got their different ways of working. They've all got their different preferences. And then a lot of people could work virtually, but now there's some mandates to go back to the office. So even working with teams, I have to be respectful of the fact that, like, one of my developers, they're sharing one car right now. And then there's the kids, and the daycares are operating differently.
Yeah.
So it's that actually segues to this next slide. This slide is really, when I was putting this together, like I said, I started putting this together the timing of it was probably, I think it was June of 2021, because I presented it in August of 2021 in my chapter. And I was just kind of like thinking outside of the box. And I'm like, all right, well, what could trigger each one of these stages? What could trigger forming? Well, if you have a new hire, if there's someone who has a promotion, because people tend to behave differently. Like, let's say it was somebody that was in one role before, but now they're your manager. Sometimes psychologically, this causes differences in teams, role change, resignation, layoffs. So layoffs, I think it's important to mention it. It absolutely does not just affect the person that was laid off, that's having to research. Sometimes it's impacting other people on the team too. And I've seen that as an instance where people are resigning. I've known several people that they've had layoffs or mergers or acquisitions at their company. And as a result, a company they were once so fond of and felt at home no longer feels like home, and they're doing the role of 3 people. And then they realize, we're human, we have to find something else, and even, oops, how did that, let's see. Going back, sorry about that. Even storming, some things that cause conflict is just unclear vision when there's no clarity on the team, it can lead to dissension, different ways of working. There can also be, the fear of job loss, risk tolerance. Different people have cultural differences. There's definitely the generational gap that's going on. I mean, I'm firmly in Generation X, but I try to really see all different sides of the different spectrums, but I'm the 48-year-old that's living with, her 74-year-old father to take care of him too, so I have a lot of practice in being around different types and different preferences, in understanding how some of that can impact teams working together, and even getting back into the workplace. So,
Great that you can recognize the similarities. I mean, that's just like a millennial, except you're not living in the basement.
right, right. I know, I kind of feel like it. I'm like, it's really, it's something. I moved back here, several years ago, like I said, for the concerted purpose of helping to give care and be there, in the event that anything struck. And last year was a challenge for me in that road. Last year, I mean, I faced a layoff last year, and my father had heart surgery and cancer, so I'm glad to be where I'm at, because it feels like the right place to be, but it definitely causes its own challenges, and so, like I said, teams definitely applies in all different spectrums of our lives, not just our office lives or searching for a job, but even if you have an elderly parent, or even if you're battling health issues, having a team of different doctors that need to communicate with one another and need to operate seamlessly, and making sure that there's no slippage in those communications that could cause an ill impact. So.
Well, and I hate all that, oh, this generation is whatever. I'm a historian by education and training.
Right.
Oh, I work in high tech, and I joke that, a programmer spends 15 to 25% of his time writing code, and 75% reading, writing, analyzing, and having meetings and presenting. So as a historian, I'm better qualified to do a programmer's job than a programmer. But I learned to program at 14, and I've worked on so many systems. I share a lot with Gen X, Y, and millennials, more than I do with, I'm a boomer. So.
Right.
But this thing about the kids these days, they were saying, the Greeks and the Romans were saying that 2,500 years ago. And I think it's true. If you travel, that we share a lot more with people all over the world who don't look like us, who have different cultures than we are different. And I think that's so much true between the generations as well.
It absolutely is. I mean, so I learn from people of all ages, and sometimes too, so being the Generation X, I mean, I kind of make jokes. I was editor of the newspaper before we had computers, but we weren't using computers, so just to date myself too, I'm helping to plan my 30-year reunion, which is going to be next month, or we're not in October yet. So next month. But I was like the stencil and having to sell the advertising and cut it and size it perfectly. So sometimes I'm really, really, really in awe of the younger generations and their ability to hit on business intelligence and trends and data analytics, because I have to be very manual about that at times. Now, over the years, I've learned out of necessity, I've learned a lot. But there's still so many people that kind of whiz by me in that. So I just learned, okay, well, talk to them, ask them to teach me. And I'm not a programmer, but right now I'm working with 4 programmers, and I'm having to navigate that language and really learn. And one of the things that I learned that I don't think I would have known is that coding is actually much like project management, where you're communicating most of the time. There's a whole lot of brainstorming and analyzation on what actually needs to happen and how to build the construct and how to do prototyping. Same thing with the resume. One of the toughest projects for me is going over my own backstory that I know intimately and trying to fit it into a 2-page max document and pull out all the non-essential information, remember all the formatting. I mean, that's a challenge. That is a project in itself. And so leaning on other people that have different other experiences and really learning about that applicant tracking system and how to get past it, super, super important. So
Absolutely. Well, I mean, programming is just like so many other, I mean, it's not engineering really, because if it crashes like a bridge, people don't die. But,
right.
you know, there are a lot of, well, even like war, you know, the famous Rumsfeld quote about known unknowns and unknown unknowns. There are so many unknown things until you try them. And you just have to figure your way through it. You know, I do implementations. I don't actually write code for applications, but it's what's called low code, no code.
Right.
And you write logic statements and stuff. But the key there again is it's really tricky to take, you know, manual systems and turn them into automated systems, which is essentially what programming is doing. And you typically don't want to take them right away. But back to your point on the generations too, that, you know, being able to see the similarities, so important to team building. And teams get so much more done so much more quickly if they're well organized. So,
well, and just having respect for other people, you know, and I mean, in respect for the cultural differences and the generation differences, I've seen so many instances where when people are made fun of or they're made to feel completely different, they start feeling ostracized and then they just don't speak up.
yeah.
And, you know, from a work perspective, that's not what you want. You know, you want to build that diversity. You want a diverse team that's got different perspectives because not one of us has all the answers. It kind of takes a team. Now, whether people are outwardly reaching to other people or going to Google, we don't have all the information. So knowing how to build those teams, knowing how to respect one another and knowing how to work with one another and share tips to help each other along is super important, because it, even like this thing that we're keeping in check, you know, your work, your health, your balance, your career. I mean, it's all just this sliding circle. And so one thing I wanted to mention about stage slippage, I mean, the way that Tuckman had it structured, it's kind of like a start that progresses through. And we know that nothing is actually always that way. Things slip back and forth. Like there's a lot of teams that they'll go from the forming stage to storming, they get past it, they start going up and are doing great. But then something happens, there's a triggering condition, and they slip back into fighting. You know, and so I just wanted to mention something here that happens. It's totally normal. You know, it's totally normal to have good days and bad days. It's just picking yourself back up and plunging through and knowing, you know, that if you don't have a stroke of luck at the first time, that maybe it's trying to try something different and just kind of keep trying different methods, reaching out to others, seeing what helps them. It's a continual progress.